On tonight's program, we are going to deviate just slightly from what we were promoting yesterday and earlier today. We were going to focus on our study on Copernicus and the Jews and continue that, but I received an article from a friend of mine and author, Alex Newman, about the UN Agenda 2030 that I felt was very important for me to share with you this evening. Alex has written numerous books on education and the indoctrination going on in America's schools, so I want to share that with you as well. We're also going to continue our conversation about the rise of anti-Semitism, and we're going to talk about some of the articles. We're going to go through some of the articles that I have been posting and sharing with our PJTN friends. So we're going to talk about those things because the world is changing. And I don't know if you get as frustrated as I get, but we're going to talk about those issues tonight. Good evening. I'm Laurie Cardoza-Moore, president of Proclaiming Justice to the Nations. The mission of PJTN is to educate Christians about our biblical responsibility to stand with our Jewish brethren and defend the state of Israel against the rise of global anti-Semitism. We accomplish that goal by producing award-winning documentary films and programs, and we distribute them through our 22 global media partners, broadcasting around the world in 200 nations, reaching over 2 billion potential viewers. And so we're delighted to have you here on our program tonight. And of course, this program was designed with you in mind because I receive emails all week about questions and comments that Christians and even members of the Jewish community. We're blessed to have both Jewish and Christian supporters of this program. And so I get emails and comments during the week, and people ask questions. So this is that opportunity to do that. I want to be able to have that dialogue with you. And so we're live here on Facebook most times. I know the last several weeks we've not been able to because my travel schedule has been so crazy. I've been busier this past year than I've been before in the past. And so we haven't got the technology, and I don't have the time yet set aside for Wednesday evenings when I travel to be able to continue, but we are going to work on that so that no matter where I am, in what city, we can always have this program. I also just want to remind you that if you do have comments or questions that you want to make through the program, just go to comments@pjtn.org, or you can respond right here on Facebook. Excuse me. So this week, we're going to talk a little bit about what's happening in the news. And on the political front, the U.S. State Department removes all mention of Palestinian Authority. And of course, this is in line with what President Trump has been doing. The Palestinian Authority, Palestinian territories no longer appear on official State Department website, which is interesting. The State Department, the U.S. State Department website has deleted the Palestinian Authority from the list of countries and areas on its website. Until recently, Palestinians appeared on the site under the name Palestinian Authority, and before that, the Palestinian territories. Over the past year, there has been a significant devaluation of the Palestinian status on the U.S. side, with the State Department ordering to remove any reference that included the word occupied territories in reference to the Palestinian Arabs. Now, the very existence of a Palestinian Authority is not present on the official website representing the U.S. State Department. This is a huge move by the Trump administration to remove them. Hopefully, God willing, we're going to see curriculum and our textbooks communicating the same information. In other news, the question is, did Ilhan Omar just call for Bibi Netanyahu's assassination? Breaking News Israel is reporting that Congresswoman Ilhan Omar said that Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's existence is a problem in an interview with CBS Face the Nation program. A political analyst who asked not to be named interpreted her statements to Breaking Israel News, saying, based on her sentiments, one can only conclude that the solution to this problem would be for Netanyahu to cease to exist. This would mean that, according to Omar, the Israeli prime minister would have to die. And she makes this declaration publicly. This is nothing less than a dog whistle for Netanyahu's assassination. I certainly hope that the people of Israel make a different decision, she said, and my hope is that they recognize that his existence, his policies, his rhetoric really is contradictory to the peace that we are all hoping that that region receives, and receives soon, Omar told host Margaret Brennan. Omar, a politician who introduced pro-BDS legislation in Congress, was denied entrance into Israel on a fact-finding mission along with her colleague Rashida Tlaib in August. Omar then hosted a press conference where she blasted the Netanyahu government for suppressing her freedom of expression. Earlier this month, Breaking Israel News exposed a relationship between the government of Turkey and Ilhan Omar, whereby the state-run media outlet called upon Turks to help fund Omar's election campaign. For Ilhan Omar to make such an outrageous statement is unbelievable, but it's not surprising to any of us who've been following her anti-Semitic comments. And of course, we know from earlier news today, President or Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu, it appears, is not going to be able to pull off this race, and Israel is going to be without what he's been termed as the king. So there is a possibility that he could still stay on as prime minister, but we're not going to know until a unity government is able to be formed. So we'll have to follow those findings or the results of the election as they come. And I also want to mention that they are deadlocked. They've been deadlocked. And during the outcome of the election, it has been reported that the Arabs did win another seat in Israel. So for those of you who hear that Israel is an apartheid state and they're constantly persecuting the Arab population, the Israeli Knesset has members of the Arab community who they govern over the Palestinian Authority area, and of course they serve in their government. So much for Israel being an apartheid state. In other news, we had an incident in Knoxville, Tennessee at UT Knoxville, and many of you have been following us for some time, so you know that we've been reporting on incidents, anti-Semitic incidents that continue to occur on the campus of UT Knoxville. And within the last 18 months, 3 anti-Semitic incidents have occurred where anti-Semites have come and spray painted anti-Semitic slurs on the rock that sits on the center of the UT Knoxville campus. Well, the most recent incident, somebody had painted on the rock and it appeared on 9/11 that the Jews did 9/11. Again, using another strategy of the protocols of the learned elders of Zion, repeating a false lie, a false accusation against the Jewish people. And we've heard this since 9/11 that the Mossad was behind 9/11, and they told all the Jews not to arrive for work that morning. Well, of course, we all know that there were many Jews who died in 9/11, and there was also a big financial firm that lost 2/3 of its employees, Jewish employees, in the World Trade Center attack. So much for, again, the propaganda and the lies that are continued. But unfortunately, the incidents continue to occur, and the people that are involved in these incidents, they are rarely reprimanded in a way that's commensurate with the work, with what they're doing, with the attacks, with the anti-Semitism, because we know that the Civil Rights Act states that if a Jewish student does not feel safe on a campus, and it doesn't matter if it's a university campus or if it's a K through 12 campus, secondary school campus, if a Jewish student doesn't feel safe, then their civil rights have been violated, and that should trigger a federal investigation to look into this activity that's going on, to look into this violation. But unfortunately, I just received an email before going on the air, and I was told that they do know who did the 9/11, that the Jews did 9/11 on this rock at UTK, and they weren't students on the campus. So supposedly they're going to put some cameras up in the area. I don't know what took them so long, because these repeated offenses continue to happen, and I have a hard time believing that they didn't have cameras in the area. But we have been involved in talking to our state legislature. I just sent a letter to the chancellor of UTK asking for a full and thorough investigation into who the individuals were that were behind it and bringing them to justice. They should be charged. So not only are they should they be charged with violating the rights, the civil rights of Jewish students on campus, but also defacing public property. Our tax dollars do pay public for this public university. So anyhow, moving on to other news, we have in religious news, there is an article that I found on The Blaze by Joy Reid, who accuses wealthy white Christian Americans are willing to enact apartheid to maintain power. And this is an MSNBC host who said they're not afraid of it and they're increasingly open about it. Well, I don't know how open these wealthy white Christian Americans are, because I haven't seen them. And for those of you who have been following us, you know that I call out Christians. It doesn't matter if they're white, black, Hispanic, Asian, if they're anti-Semites. You know, I've been calling them out and exposing them, but I haven't seen this late episode. But I want you to take a look at this video. I want to show you of the comments, the outrageous comments that Joy Reid made. Let's take a look.
Israel, all sorts of countries that might have an interest in the outcome of the election and an interest in it coming out in his favor, regardless of what the majority of Americans want. Next thing, very quickly, demographic change. There has been a flip in the demographic fortunes of white America, such that in several states, the rate of death, meaning suicide, death from drug overdoses, etc., is exceeding the rate of births. Of the states where deaths now exceed births for white Americans, 13 of those voted for Donald Trump and 13 of those voted for Hillary Clinton. 4 of them are states that flipped from President Obama in 2012 to Trump in 2016: Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Florida. Meaning that in states where white death rates are exceeding white birth rates, those states are starting to move toward the minority, toward the Republicans. Next, gerrymandering. There have been many studies that show, obviously, that gerrymandering is a system by which Republicans are protecting their power regardless of what the majority wants. But you had now the files of a gentleman named Thomas Hofeller, which were exposed to the country by his estranged daughter. On those files, he wrote a study in 2015 concluding that if a census question was added, a citizenship question was added to the census, it would enable Republicans to gerrymander and claim it's based on party, but he literally explicitly said it would enable them to prevent non-white people from gaining a majority, a power majority, that they could actually create a favorable condition for white people and Republicans by using the system in that way. So what I'll say is, to quickly wrap up, is that, you know, my parents are foreign, so I don't have this same sort of gauzy vision of either America's history or its possibilities. My father grew up in the Congo, which is also a system of minority rule based on tribe. And my mother came from a system in which the last president in her lifetime served for 24 years. No country is an eternal democracy. Democracy is extremely fragile, and multiracial democracy is so fragile, we're practically the only one that's pulled it off. My husband's from England. England has like 6% non-white people. This is a very difficult thing to maintain, and when you have a very determined minority, in this case, wealthy white men and wealthy white Christian men and Christian Americans who are of the fundamentalist variety, who are very clear that no matter what happens, if they have to pull the South Africa model to maintain power forever, they will do it. And they're not afraid of it, and they're increasingly open about it. And Donald Trump is merely the avatar for this. He didn't create it. He simply benefited from it. And I think the sooner that the majority, the actual numerical majority in this country, figures that out and stops treating these elections as just foregone conclusions, that you can fix it with just a simple election and that it will be fair, free and fair, the sooner that we will wake up and actually have majority rule in this country.
These statements are absolutely outrageous. It kind of reminds me of President Obama when he went to Egypt on his apology tour and apologized to the Muslim world. Well, this woman, Joy Reid, according to the Washington Examiner, Reid made the claims while speaking during a panel on civic participation in an age of democratic peril. Well, where's the democratic peril but coming out of the Democratic Party? It was an event for the American Federation of Teachers Union. This is outrageous. Now, you know these teachers are probably going to go back and recite what this supposedly esteemed, you heard all the applause that she received, so obviously the people in the audience agreed with her statements. This is outrageous that she would make such a claim that is not true. She has no evidence. This is what bothers me about this, ladies and gentlemen. When I make claims about people, I substantiate those claims. I give them the evidence. What does she do? She throws President Trump into the mix, and she accuses all white, wealthy Christian males to be involved in this. Or maybe not males, maybe just all white Christians. So you could be male or female. It's unbelievable that this goes on and nobody calls people like this out. It is this type of these types of statements that inflame and incite violence that is going on. We wonder why our country is divided. It's people like her. I remember a dear friend of mine who is the pastor of an African-American church in Fort Lauderdale. He said to me after the Zimmerman case, the hearings happened, or actually it was right after the shooting that weekend. And he made the comment to his congregation, the problem is you've got to learn how to forgive. You can't blame the white people. Of course, Zimmerman was, I believe he was of Hispanic, Latino descent, but you've got to stop blaming this generation for what's happened in the past. And this is what Obama does. This is why he's incited and why we have this. I deal with African Americans, Asians, Hispanics all the time. I never see what this woman is talking about. This inflames me that this goes on unchecked. And do they care? No, because once you put the statement out there, it gets repeated. And people are stupid enough to believe this stuff. So I'm just saying. In other religion news, I wanted to share with you that a Michigan church canceled a 9/11 event last week due to Muslim pressure. So this is... it was canceled on 9/11. It was an event that was critical to the interfaith, and this was reported by WND.com. But the article goes on to say that a Michigan church canceled a 9/11 event critical of the interfaith movement and Islamic supremacism after complaints from the Council on American Islamic Relations and politicians. Well, who is the Council on American Islamic Relations? They're a Muslim Brotherhood front group. They were listed as an unindicted co-conspirator in the largest terrorist fundraising operation in the history of the United States of America. Who listens to them? Why would a church, why would a pastor bow to the pressure of a group that's raising money to fund Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood. I don't understand this. And then the politicians, well, I can expect the politicians that represent, but the story goes on, the article goes on to say, Bloomfield Hills Baptist Church was to host a 2-day event called 9/11 Forgotten, ? Is Michigan surrendering to Islam? Well, and that was on Wednesday and Thursday. Well, we all know you can't go into Dearborn, Michigan. We've seen the videos of Christians who talk about their faith and go into Dearborn. They are chased out of the community. It is not safe because it has become, it's received the nickname of Dearbornistan. And so we think that, that there isn't a problem there and we're just going to, dig a hole and bury our heads in the sand and act like it doesn't exist. The story goes on to say a former Muslim who has become a popular speaker, his name is Shahram Hadian, was to speak Wednesday on how the interfaith movement is sabotaging America and the church. And on Thursday, Jim Simpson, a former Office of Management and Budget economist to 3 presidents and an investigative reporter, was to speak on how Islam is destroying America from within. The event was planned by a group called the Detroit Coalition for Freedom. In response to the cancellation, the organization United West featured the 2 speakers in a webinar on Wednesday at 7 p.m. That was last week. Last week, the Baptist Church's pastor, Donald McKay, defended the event in an interview with a local television station. He said Islam is a growing threat in the United States of America. It is. He said, we don't hate Muslims. We hate the ideology they are identified with. It's the Islamists, ladies and gentlemen. It's the Islamists who have a radical agenda. Yes, we should be concerned about what their involvement is in our communities because they do not adhere to the freedoms and the liberties that our Judeo-Christian values afford us. Yes, we should be concerned. Hadian said on his website that his September 11th discussion would expose the growing deception of interfaith dialogue and explain how interfaith dialogue is compromising the gospel and our national security. And it is, ladies and gentlemen, because when you deal with the people who say that their goal, their agenda, is to annihilate Christians and Jews, kill the great Satan and the little Satan, well, maybe we should consider that. There are Muslims like Zuhdi Jasser and others who are reformists, who are trying to reform Islam. They haven't been so successful, but they're trying. Those are Muslims who want to live in America, who enjoy the freedom, who don't believe in the mentality of these Islamists and their goal to destroy or bring down America. We know, in fact, CARE, when CARE was listed as the unindicted co-conspirator in the largest terrorist fundraising operation in the history of the United States, they were involved with raising money in Dallas, Texas. And when the FBI investigated that incident, they found the Muslim Brotherhood's agenda, and that was to destroy America from within. So yes, is anything this pastor is saying wrong? No. And he gets chastised. The article goes on, but the Council on American Islamic Relations, or CARE, along with members of Congress and state representatives, pressed the church to cancel the event, and its elders complied. How disappointing, because that pastor and that church just bowed its knee to radical extremists and people who are stupid enough to promote the radical extremist agenda. The executive director of CARE's Michigan chapter, Dawood Walid, cast the event's message as anti-Muslim bigotry. No, even Muslims say this about their own. You all know that I serve as a special envoy at the United Nations. I've spoken on 2 panels with Muslim women, and they say the same thing. Why isn't the West, why isn't America helping Muslim women obtain their freedoms? There are still honor killings going on. There is still female genital mutilation going on. And these women, one woman challenged the Western women. You've heard me say this on this program before, but said to the Western women here in the United States, why would you have a hijab day and dress up your daughters with a symbol of Islamic oppression of women? Great question. Why would we do that? The article went on to say, though we believe that houses of worship have the right to preach their doctrine, this is, of course, the quote from Dawood Walid, we find it incredibly irresponsible for a church to invite someone who has the objective of spewing clear anti-Muslim bigotry. Walid told the Detroit Free Press. Well, as I said, ladies and gentlemen, it's true. This is what they say. We're not spewing anything. We're just repeating what they have said. CARE Michigan Executive Director Dawood Walid made that statement on YouTube, so you could probably find it on YouTube. While CARE portrays itself as a civil rights group, its history illustrates the point of Simpson's lecture. Movements such as the Muslim Brotherhood are present in the United States, and as a Muslim Brotherhood document seized by the FBI shows, to destroy Western civilization from within. CARE has been shown in court to be a front for the terrorist organization Hamas, the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. It was designated by the State Department as an unindicted co-conspirator in a scheme to fund Hamas, and the United Arab Emirates in 2014 listed CARE as one of 83 banned terrorist organizations. Well, that's the UAE, along with the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS. So there were two Muslim state lawmakers who also stated, quote, an attempt to assign blame for 9/11 that this whole incident was an attempt to assign blame for 9/11 to the entire Muslim community. No, it wasn't. It was talking about the reality of where we are. He went on to say our community should be outraged by these scheduled toxic bigoted events, they said in the statement. With the rise of mass shootings by white domestic terrorists targeting those they deem other, we are deeply disturbed that a place of worship would host an event that continues to fan the flames of hate and intolerance. Well, he should probably talk to Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, because according to his definition, that's what they're doing. But ladies and gentlemen, years ago, back in 2010, for those of you who've been with us long enough, you can look it up if Google will let you. But the mosque in Murfreesboro, they were trying to put a 52,000 square foot facility in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And the citizens of the community contacted us and asked us to help them to expose this group. Well, in the research that we did, 2 of the board members had ties to Hamas. One of them was actively recruiting Muslims to kill Jews to free Palestine on his MySpace page. And we went public with that. And of course, I got all kinds of death threats. But I asked the question, why would 2 people tied to Hamas, who were involved in a mosque in Murfreesboro that had been there for over 20 years, a small facility, 1,500 square feet, 25 members, why would they want to build a 52,000 square foot compound? Just a question to ask, knowing that they had ties to Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood. Why would they do that? Well, of course, we got chastised because when we had the hearings and the plaintiffs, the citizens brought the lawsuit, the judge that overheard that case agreed with the plaintiffs, with the citizens, that the county was guilty of not properly noticing or notifying the community that they were going to be voting on this facility. They somehow published it in a newspaper of record that had a small circulation, and it didn't cover the area where that facility was going to be built. But of course, we didn't stop the whole facility because another judge came in and overruled what the lower court judge had ruled. This is going on all the time, ladies and gentlemen. So, and it's not because I'm anti-Muslim, but I am anti-Islamic terrorist. And we all should be, because it threatens our very freedom and our liberty. Now, moving on, I do want to talk about another article in religion, but before I do that, we're going to go ahead and cut and go to break, I want you to look at another way that you can support PJTN. And when we come back, we're going to talk about Princeton's study that confirms Gog and Magog is a realistic scenario. We'll be right back. I want to take you to Israel in pictures and film. I want you to see how God's sovereign hand can be seen before our eyes right here in this land. That's why PJTN is offering a special anniversary package that includes a captivating new book and award-winning DVD. Israel Rising is a unique visual story of Israel's miraculous journey from unforgiving desert to thriving nation. Thousands of years ago, the prophet Ezekiel foretold a future time in which the arid land of Israel would come alive for its people. Now this breathtaking book documents the fulfillment of this vision, as rarely seen photographs from the 1880s to the 1940s are juxtaposed with recent photos of the same locations. This book will inspire and captivate you as it illuminates Israel's foretold awakening in a new and unforgettable way. In addition, you'll receive the award-winning documentary, Israel Indivisible: The Case for the Ancient Homeland. This inspiring film examines the many political twists and turns that make Israel the world's most controversial nation. From Abraham and the Promise to the issues facing the Jewish state today, the film examines the historical, archaeological, legal, and biblical foundations for the modern state of Israel. This is a limited time offer for these two remarkable resources for just a one-time gift of $70 today. Your generous donation will help ensure that PJTN stays on the front lines and in the headlines of all the important issues facing Israel and our Jewish brethren. So please go to pjtn.org today. Welcome back. And I want to just remind you all that if you haven't been to the website, if you haven't signed up yet to become a PJTN Watchman, I want to encourage you to go to pjtn.org. And when you're there, please sign the petition to remove Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Now, before we went to break, I talked about Princeton, who just did a study confirming Gog and Magog is a realistic scenario. And I found this fascinating, because the recent study by Princeton University's program on science and global security developed a simulation of an escalating war between the United States and Russia. Founded the Global Science and Global Security was founded in 1974. It conducts scientific, technical, and policy research, analysis, and outreach to advance national and international policies for a safer and more peaceful world. The simulation is based on realistic nuclear force postures, targets, and fatality estimates. According to their estimates, more than 90 million people would be killed or injured within the first few hours of the conflict. The study, now remember, the Gog-Magog War is the final battle. The study comes in the wake of what the Science and Global Security considers a growing risk of nuclear conflict following the abandonment of nuclear agreements. Their assessment was illustrated by a 4-minute video depicting a conflict that escalates from a conventional confrontation to a full-on nuclear war. The study, based on estimates of existing nuclear capabilities and protocols, set the immediate casualties at 90 million, but noted that the figure would probably grow significantly. In the opening stages, the study suggests a scenario in which North America Treaty Alliance, NATO troops threaten Russia, which responds with a nuclear warning shot. NATO retaliates with a single tactical airstrike. Russia responds by sending 300 nuclear warheads via aircraft and short-range missiles targeting NATO bases and troops. NATO retaliates with 180 warheads and similar strikes against Russia, and they estimate some 2.6 million dead in the first 3 hours of the conflict. So it's interesting that here is Princeton University, who's done research on this, on the Gog-Magog war, to see if the scenario is possible. And as we found out, it is. I want to, before I go to our next article that I wanted to share with you about the UN Agenda 2030, I want to go back to our Facebook page and just see if we have any comments or questions from our audience. And because I love to hear your thoughts and see some of our friends back on. And I'm just refreshing now. Okay. And seeing Tina Whistler is with us tonight. Thank you, Tina. And Jean McConnell also. Kathy Johnson joined. It's great to have Kathy back from Ohio. It's always good to see you. So anyhow, so we're going to continue on. There was an article that I found today by Alex Newman, as I mentioned earlier. He's a great friend to PJTN. He's also a fantastic author. If you go to our website at pjtn.org, we've got her or one of his books on our sales page called Crimes of the Educators. It's one of the best books that have been written about the indoctrination of our children and how our public school has taken over and is indoctrinating our children with propaganda. So the article goes on. It's quite long, but it's worth talking about and sharing with you, and that's why I wanted to deviate from our usual program of doing a Bible study right now during this time, because this is an important topic. It's an important issue that we need to talk about, because most people, the United Nations, they think don't affect their daily lives here in the United States. And you would be amazed at how the UN has infiltrated even to our local communities, even to the local level, their involvement. We know about the United Nations involvement in world affairs, and we also know about how the United Nations feels about Israel. Of course, the UN was the organization that protected Israel and helped establish Israel. But now look at how the United Nations has done an about-face. And of course, a lot of it is because of the result of the Islamic countries who have become members of the United Nations and the influence that they wield, the power that they wield. But the article states that it's called the Global Alliance of Religions Joins Push for UN Agenda 2030. And the article starts stating that about 1,000 representatives of world religions and other organizations gathered in Germany in late August to advance globalism and a planetary uniting of religions to promote the United Nations' so-called Master Plan for Humanity, known as UN Agenda 2030. Critics expressed alarm that self-proclaimed religious leaders were embracing dangerous world order ideas totally at odds with liberty and our Judeo-Christian. Of course, Alex puts Christianity, but it's really our Judeo-Christian values. The implications are massive. He goes on to write the controversial 10th World Assembly of Religions for Peace, backed by George Soros, and the globalist-controlled German government and other powerful forces aim to unify the world's religious organizations behind key elements of the establishment's agenda, including a UN-guided modern order. Operating in almost 100 nations, the alliance claims to be the world's largest and most representative coalition of religious and indigenous communities. It is funded by Soros, the Rockefellers, the Ford Foundation, the UN Foundation, various UN agencies, U.S. taxpayers, via the State Department, and more. I thought that Trump cut the funding to the United Nations. Why are we funding this initiative? And wait, let's hear more, because you're going to understand why. Among other decisions, the coalition vowed to increase cooperation among their religious sects under the guise of caring for the earth, the entire web of life, and what participants described as the common good. The common good includes Earth with its air, water, soil, and web of life. Central to it all, by their own admission, is the totalitarian UN Agenda 2030 and the increasingly discredited man-made global warming hypothesis claiming CO2 is pollution. In the speeches and in the final Religions for Peace declaration, it became abundantly clear that these self-styled religious leaders have been, at the very least, co-opted or duped into advancing globalism, socialism, and other ideologies and theologies deeply at odds with traditional Americanism and our Judeo-biblical, Judeo-Christian values. The God of the Bible said, quote, "Thou shalt not steal," for instance, while the attendees advocated the global socialism, essentially the institutionalization of thievery. The primary focus of the gathering appeared to be promoting the UN as the solution to virtually all human problems. In particular, the totalitarian-inspired UN Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, described by top UN leaders as the master plan for humanity, and the Global Declaration of Interdependence, are at the heart of the whole effort to save what the document refers to as Mother Earth, and claiming that the modern world order is underpinned by the UN. The religious leaders were not shy about admitting it. For instance, in the call to action, signatories agreed to urge religious communities to invest their resources in alignment with achieving their goals. The declaration also states explicitly that the UN's controversial vision, rather than the Bible or other religious texts, should guide human development. An extraordinary statement coming from religious leaders, some of whom identify as Christians. We commit to human development as set forth in the Sustainable Development Goals, the agreement declares. Examining the UN Agenda 2030 in detail highlights the enormous implications of the statement. For instance, Goal 10 of the program demands that governments and the UN reduce inequality within and among countries. To do that, the agreement continues, will only be possible if wealth is shared and income inequality is addressed. In other words, national and international socialism, an anti-biblical ideology that has produced untold misery, death, and destruction everywhere it has been imposed. The UN plan also demands that governments take control of production and consumption. In another key element of totalitarianism, technocracy and socialism, and it promotes indoctrination of children, population control, and much more. We know, for those of you who've been following us and you are familiar with our K through 12 initiative, the United Nations gave us Common Core. They gave us the propaganda in our textbooks and the indoctrination of our children. It is especially bizarre that the UN Agenda 2030 is being embraced by so many self-proclaimed religious leaders. Consider, among other red flags, that the mass-murdering dictatorship enslaving communist China boasted openly that it played a crucial role in developing the UN agenda. China, we watch what's happening over in Hong Kong right now. And China is given the ability to have a voice in this program. This is the height of hypocrisy. Then consider, the article goes on, then consider that the godless Chinese regime ruthlessly persecutes Christians, Muslims, Falun Gong practitioners, and others, and has since its inception. Mass murdering dictators such as genocidal Marxist tyrant Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe could barely contain their glee over the UN scheme. But of course, as with the UN Agenda 2030, much of their religious declaration adopted at the conference in Lindau, Germany, revolves around the supposed cataclysmic heating of the earth, which is claimed to be caused by human emissions of CO2. And so, to save humanity from this alleged scourge, an essential gas that is exhaled by humans and used by plants in photosynthesis, globalism and government controls over the economy are claimed to be crucial. No mention was made of the fact that human emissions of CO2 make up a fraction of 1% of all the greenhouse gases present naturally in the atmosphere. Quote, "We will foster sustainable and integral human development by promoting the justice, inclusive citizenship, and equal opportunities interwoven through the UN agenda." The declaration said, "We will champion personal accountability for sustainable consumption, the dignity of labor, and equitable distribution of wealth. We will honor the insights of science and steward progress in digital technology toward the good of all. We will advance universal access to education. We will continue to promote the role of women and youth in society and their leadership in institutions at the local, national, regional, and global levels." The declaration signatories, who also vowed to advocate for government policies to protect rainforests, defend the rights of indigenous peoples, and fulfill their pledges to the Paris Agreement on climate change. Of course, President Trump announced that the U.S. government would withdraw from the UN Paris Agreement. So the religious leaders were placing themselves squarely in opposition to Trump and his supporters, many of whom are Christians. The leaders pledged to mobilize their congregations to protect the earth and even to establish green congregations. The document also promotes mass migration throughout, all under the guise of aiding refugees. Indeed, the declaration seeks to portray advocates of the Islamic influx into what was once known as Christendom as genuine humanitarians, while opponents are painted as hateful and bigoted. No reference is made about the role of deep state globalists at the UN and in governments worldwide in engineering the massive movement of human beings into the West using illegal wars, something the New American has documented extensively. The goal of mass migration, put simply, is to erode the nation state and Christian civilization, as proponents themselves have acknowledged. Another central element of the agenda is advancing the UN's deeply perverted understanding of human rights. The UN view is that governments and international agreements confer irrevocable privileges on people that can never be used contrary to the purposes and principles of the UN, as explained in Article 29 of the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Ironically, the UN literally puts mass murdering dictators, communists, Islamists, and other human rights violators, people such as the late Muammar Gaddafi, that these people are put in these positions. And you know, we've talked about this issue in the past. This perverse UN understanding of rights is essentially the opposite of America's traditional view of human rights. Indeed, the United States was founded on the self-evident truth that God endowed individuals with inalienable rights and that governments are established to protect those rights. These God-given rights were enshrined by America's Judeo-Christian founders in the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution, which are the foundation of the nation's government. There are some traditional Christian notions in the platitudes expressed at the Religions for Peace conference, such as promoting forgiveness. But despite the presence of self-proclaimed evangelical Protestant Christians, Orthodox Christians, and Roman Catholics, the final declaration adopted in Germany is filled with unbiblical and even anti-biblical extremism that would be instantly recognizable to informed Christians. Indeed, from a Christian perspective, the whole premise of the effort is flawed, with the biblical repeatedly instructing God's people not to be bound together with unbelievers. A brief perusal of the website, meanwhile, reveals that the Religions for Peace outfit includes Muslim Brotherhood-linked Islamists, hardcore Hindus who worship numerous gods, Buddhists, Shinto adherents, proud spirit worshippers, and all manner of other pagan and heathen leaders. Even more troubling for Christians, perhaps, is that the declaration commits signatories to advancing peace education from early childhood to adults across our religious communities. Now, this all sounds completely harmless, ladies and gentlemen, But when you look at the people that are behind this effort, who are pushing this effort and what their globalist agenda is, it is very dangerous. And it is not something that we should be a part of. We should not be funding it. But as I mentioned earlier in the article that Alex wrote to us, that our State Department is funding this. So I want to encourage you to contact your congressmen and your senators. I will be in Washington, D.C. next week, and you can bet I will be bringing this issue up, the UN Agenda 2030, demanding that the United States pull out of it. I find it interesting because some of the content that we have been finding in textbooks and in curriculum that we're teaching to our children, we're teaching our children that the treaties, international treaties, have more sway and are superior to our Constitution in the United States. And ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who are 50 plus, you remember being taught in your civics class or your U.S. history class that there is no international treaty that supersedes the U.S. Constitution, that the U.S. Constitution is superior over all other international treaties. We take care of America first. And the world, the rest of the world, looks to America to be strong from tyrants. And unfortunately, that's what the United Nations has become. We know that the UN, it's the education, it's their globalization of education, and we know how the UN feels about Israel. Of course, Alex doesn't go into the possible scenarios that could happen with Israel if this gets implemented and how that's going to affect them. The United Nations, as it's doing right now, will turn the world against Israel, will marginalize them. And as I talked about the Gog-Magog war, yes, there will be a final battle. And we know that the Lord will put a hook in the mouths of the nations, and he will drag them with that hook in their mouth into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and he will enter into judgment with them on account of how they treated Israel and the Jewish people. Let that be a lesson and a reminder, a sobering reminder to all of us. That concludes our program for this evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you for joining me this evening. I want to just remind you that if you have not gone to our website and signed up to become a PJTN Watchman, I want to encourage you to do so. And we're going to close with a video, but before we close, I want to share in a lighthearted way that Disney's coming out with its first Jewish princess debuts in time for Hanukkah, and this came out today. It's an article on the Schmooze by Irene Connolly, and the article goes on to say, this Hanukkah season, the Disney universe will finally gain a princess who's a member of the tribe. While Sarah Silverman sparked some hope and a lot of confusion last year by claiming her character in Wreck-It Ralph as the first Jewish princess, Disney has never included an officially kosher character. We love Sarah, but a Jewish voiceover actress doesn't make a Jewish character. Otherwise, Pocahontas, voiced by Judy Kuhn, would be Jewish. But on September 17th, the entertainment giant announced its inaugural Hanukkah special, which will air on Disney Junior series Elena of Avalor, and feature a princess from a Latino Jewish kingdom. The special will star Jamie Lynn Sigler, who's known for playing a slightly different kind of princess, spoiled but sympathetic mafia daughter, Meadow from The Sopranos. Sigler, whose Ashkenazi, Sephardic, and Cuban heritage make her a real-life analog to her on-screen avatar, took to Twitter to celebrate her opportunity to play Disney's first Jewish princess. Very exciting, ladies and gentlemen. So be looking for that. But again, if you have any, I just want to remind you, if you have any prayer requests, please email us, or comments about our program, please email me at comments@pjtn.org. Remember to follow us on Instagram and Twitter. You can find those links on our website at pjtn.org. So go to them and sign up. And also, don't forget to go to YouTube. We have a PJTN TV YouTube page, And I want to encourage you to go there and subscribe. We've got a lot of great informational videos. We need for you to help us share those messages with your family and your friends as well. And of course, don't forget to sign the petition to get rid of Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. And many of you know that there's more information on the website, but I'll be in Minneapolis this weekend on Saturday, actually, speaking at a prophecy conference, Understanding the Times. And it'll be my first time to be there. I'm excited and delighted to be able to meet some of the citizens from Minnesota and some of the surrounding. In fact, I understand people are coming from around the globe. There should be 5,000 to 6,000 attendees. So please go to the website, sign up. We want to invite you to join us if you're going to be in the area, or make the trek. I know it's going to be very informative, and I know you'll enjoy it. We're going to close with just another short video. I want to thank you again for joining us this evening and for hearing this information. Remember, this will be posted on our PJTN TV YouTube page. You can share this program with your family and friends. We need to push it out, ladies and gentlemen. So God bless you. Thank you. Let's take a look at this closing video, and we'll, God willing, see you next week right here on PJTN Online.
To support this program, send your tax-deductible gift to Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, P.O. Box 682711, Franklin, Tennessee 37068. You can also support PJTN online. Visit pjtn.org or call 1-877-873-9020.
Anti-Semitism has reached epic proportions, and Israel is now surrounded by nations who seek its destruction. For Israel to lose just one battle would mean losing everything. As Christians, it is our biblical responsibility to stand with our Jewish brethren and Israel. PJTN needs your help to reach more Christians with this urgent message. Please visit our website to become a member today and order our award-winning documentaries. You must decide that you won't be silent. Sign up now at pjtn.org. God bless you, and thank you for your support and prayers.